welcome to Grab or Stab. I'm Matt McFarland. Here we grab if it's good and we stab if it's not. I have a question for you guys. What happens when you mix the mafia, a lawsuit, one of the best ass shots in horror film history, and overall just 83 minutes of pure terror? Well, you get one of the most iconic horror films of all time. Today we're going to be talking about the original, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, released in 1974. But before we get into all of that, let me explain how decisions are made around this place on whether or not to grab or stab a movie. First of all, how good are the kills? Second, the characters. Third, how does the movie affect either the genre or the franchise? And fourth, how scary is it? The original Chainsaw movie is about a brother and a sister who hear that their grandfather's gravesite may have been vandalized. So they set out with a group of friends to go check out old granddaddy's gravesite to investigate what happened. After a detour to an old family farmhouse, they discover a group of demented, murderous outcasts living next door. And although the movie is groundbreaking in so many ways, the one thing I don't think the movie does well with is with the characters. The characters are no more than just NPCs in the Slaughterhouse family's little Food Network pilot called Live, Laugh, Slash. Going into your first time watching this movie, you might expect a really gory film where a bunch of young people get hacked up by a chainsaw. It's actually a lot less gory than you'd expect. The horror and the gruesomeness of the movie come from more how you feel while you watch it. One thing I will say, do not eat an Arby's classic roast beef while you watch this movie. Trust me. Part of the reason for the lack of blood in the movie was because director Tobe Hooper intended to make the movie have a PG rating by having most of the horror off screen. However, this plan actually backfired and made the movie even more horrifying.
How do I get an R rating? No, actually I said, how do I get a PG rating and hang someone on a meat hook?
And I talked him into, it will be much, much stronger with no blood at all. And that scene has not one drop of blood in it.
What partly makes the movie so terrifying as well is that it's not a supernatural film. You watch this movie and you think there are people like this in the world somewhere, especially in Texas. Come on, relax. I like Texas and all, but let's be honest here. You guys can be a little weird sometimes.
It's like I was always, in Texas, always lived in the city, and out there got kind of scary.
The movie is credited with originating so many things that are now common in slasher films, like the use of power tools as murder weapons and the characterization of a giant-ass faceless killer. The movie was also among the first wave of slasher films to become popular just before the genre really took off in the late 70s and early 80s with films like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Most people are familiar with this movie because of Leatherface, the giant-ass faceless killer who uses the chainsaw as his most iconic weapon. Tobe Hooper, the director, has said that the idea for Leatherface was actually inspired from a story a doctor once told him about a prank he did in med school. The doctor's class was studying cadavers and he skinned one of the cadavers to make a mask for a Halloween party. Leatherface was played by Icelandic-American actor Gunnar Hansen, who originally turned down the role because of the brutality of the plot, but was later persuaded to take the role by his friend, Marilyn Burns, who played Sally in the movie. Gunnar was reportedly paid a granddaddy total of $800 for 6 weeks of filming over 12 hours every single day. Some might say this is the price you pay for a break in acting, or some might call this working at Walmart. Produced and directed by Tobe Hooper, who also directed Part 2 12 years later, part of what makes this film so iconic was that it was produced for a laughable $140,000 and used a cast of relatively unknown actors, mainly drawn from the Central Texas area. However, that limited budget was part of the reason for some of the most iconic scenes in the movie. The limited budget forced some of the long hours on set, so when you're watching the movie, if you think some of the actors look pretty miserable, because they were pretty fucking miserable. Some of the stories from on set were that when filming the iconic dinner table scene towards the end, that it was so hot and the meat on the table was rotting, the body odor was terrible, which all combined to make people on set step away at times to throw up.
Shooting Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like a really grueling, fun, but very chaotic experience of filmmaking.
When I got through, I didn't care if I never worked on another picture.
People were puking, on that set continuously.
Cuts and thorns and weeds and dirt and rocks and bugs.
Boy, was it hot, and the meat got rotten in a hurry, and we're all in there. I never did get ill physically, where a lot of people did. They run outside, come back in.
There was a moment during the film during the dinner scene when I went out and threw up.
Gunnar Hansen, who played Leatherface, even said they wouldn't even wash his costume because they were worried that the laundry might lose it or that it would change color. They didn't even have enough money for a second costume. He said he wore the Leatherface costume 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, in 100-degree weather for a month. Nothing like the smell of summer Texas swamp ass on a movie set. I actually think I saw that scent one time at Bed Bath & Beyond. Originally, Tobe Hooper actually had a very hard time finding a distributor for the movie because it was so gruesome.
Luckily for us, we got a lot of angry response. People condemned the movie. The Philadelphia Inquirer ran front-page stories about how people were throwing up in the theater, physically ill, leaving the theater angry and demanding their money back. And we're reading this going, thank you.
Eventually, the movie was picked up by a company named Bryanston Distribution, which come to find out had ties to the mafia. More on that later. The gruesomeness of the movie stands true even today. There are several scenes where you definitely catch yourself making the stank face because it's that damn horrifying. And what's the stank face? That face. Yeah. Even after being picked up, it was banned in several countries. Some theaters even stopped showing the film altogether because there were so many complaints about the violence. But in the end, the movie was massively profitable. I mean, we're talking about your often drunk uncle accidentally buying Bitcoin 10 years ago type profitability here. Some figures estimate the movie grossed over $30 million.
And with a title like Texas and Chainsaw and Massacre, heck, I'd go see it.
Director Tobe Hooper does credit inspiration for the film based on some elements from the real-life murderer Ed Gein, who's also known as the Butcher of Plainfield, who was a notorious murderer in the 1950s in Wisconsin. Ed was such a nice guy, he would dig up corpses from local graveyards and fashion trophies and keepsakes from their bones and their skin. He also eventually confessed to killing 2 women. When the county sheriff searched Gein's property, they found a hanging decapitated body, human bones, a waste basket made of human skin, which nowadays would probably be pretty popular on Pinterest, and all kinds of clothes and furniture pieces made from human body parts. Some might call this a crime scene, but other people might just say you accidentally spent too much money at a Midwestern consignment shop. Honey, is that a belt made from human nipples? I needed a belt. However, there has been speculation that the movie is less inspired by Ed Gein and more about the meat industry in the United States. More on that in a minute. This movie jump-started a major horror franchise consisting of 9 movies, video games, and several comic books. Over the next several months, I'll be covering the first 9 installments of the franchise, including the newest movie, which came out in February of this year. This series is going to be a long and a wild one, full of some good movies and some really bad movies, but I'm definitely looking forward to it because there's going to be tons of good moments and plenty of corny jokes. I can't wait. But before all that, we need to find out if the original TCM is one that we want to grab or one that we want to stab. So let's get into the movie. The movie opens on a dark and a serious note with a long title scroll brilliantly narrated by actor John Larroquette, who among the several other projects he had been in also narrated the 2003 and 2006 Texas Chainsaw films, along with the newest 2022 Texas Chainsaw release. John Larroquette has since said that his payment at the time for doing the narration was a joint. Yeah, I just said a joint. This shows you how crazy the making of this movie was. The narrator for one of the most iconic horror films of all time was literally paid in weed. The prologue lays out that you're about to see some really messed up stuff happen to a group of 5 friends, which lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in American history. This prologue also plays into the heavily touted narrative that the movie is inspired by a true story. Also, the outdated, grainy look of the movie makes it feel like a documentary, which makes it feel even more real. And here we are, 1973, where the polyester was plentiful, the US involvement in Vietnam has now ended, and the year of the debut of The Exorcist. The opening scene wastes no time and starts off with some very disturbing close-up corpse pictures to the sound of a flash camera and the iconic Texas Chainsaw sound effects, making the audience feel like it's a crime scene right away. We are then in a Texas cemetery with a nice little close-up of someone's rotting face set with a beautiful sunrise. Ah. That's nice. We hear a voice over the radio describing what's apparently happened here. Someone created an artwork at the cemetery made up of a bunch of corpses they dug out of the graveyard. The opening credits continue to play over the sound of the voice on the radio. We then see a poor little dead armadillo on the side of the road. Fun fact, they almost used a dead horse they found for the scene, but decided not to because of how bad it smelled. Armadillos play a role in later Chainsaw films as well, and they were probably used to just make you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. We now see a green van pulled over on the side of the road. This van was actually borrowed from one of the sound engineers on set. The van looks like it's full of young people pulled over trying to help a guy in a wheelchair get out. This person is Franklin, played by actor Partain, who's getting out of the car to pee in what looks like a coffee can. The semi-truck then drives by, kicking up a bunch of shit, causes Franklin to freak out and get rocketed down the hill and kicked out of his wheelchair. It really makes you feel sorry for the guy. A hell of a pecan throw though. I don't think he got a drip on himself. But damn, I hope he's okay. Turns out Franklin's ego is mainly the only thing hurt here, but he's already had enough and he doesn't want to be on this road trip anymore. You're already starting to see Franklin's whiny side here. Paul Partain, the actor that played Franklin, said that he was afraid that if he stopped being as whiny as Franklin off-screen, that he might lose the character and never get it back. So he stayed in character the entire month of shooting. So when you see the other actors getting annoyed with Franklin, they're actually really annoyed with the guy on or off screen.
Paul was like the outsider, intentionally, I mean, in the van he was, but then also just as we hung out too, Paul was kind of like, you know, ostracized, send him over there, you know.
And unfortunately, Franklin was such a whiny bastard that I was afraid if I ever took him off, that I couldn't get him back. And so I kept him on. And so it was easy for everybody to go, God, I don't want to be near that son of a bitch. And you can't blame him either.
We now see inside of the car where we see a group of 5 friends, Jerry, Pam, Franklin, Sally, and Kirk. Jerry, the driver, played by Alan Danziger, is clearly getting pretty tired of listening to Pam. The group arrives at the gravesite for the grandpa of Franklin and his sister, final girl Sally, played by Marilyn Burns, one of the original Scream Queens, who seems like she was annoyed with Franklin from the moment he came out of the womb. Marilyn Burns also later makes 2 cameos in future Texas Chainsaw films, The Next Generation 20 years later and 2013's Texas Chainsaw. The group came here because they heard their grandpa's grave might have been vandalized. This scene gives you a nice little look at the fine local folks that also came to see what happened. Here we cut to a crazy drunk guy who apparently likes to play a little local drinking game called Let's Take a Shot every time they identify a new corpse. Spoiler alert, he gets pretty shit-faced.
Things happen here about, they don't tell about.
Luckily for Franklin and Sally, their granddad's grave was okay, so they just go on about their day and drive off. While driving, they smell something terrible and Franklin notices they're passing the old slaughterhouse their grandpa used to sell cattle to. Franklin then gets into a gruesome description of how they used to slaughter the cows, followed by several close-ups of how miserable and mistreated the cows look. This is another part of the movie that nods at the possible actual central theme of the movie, which is the meat industry in the United States. Tobe Hooper himself had even become vegetarian because of the cruelty of the meat industry. PETA even listed the movie as one of the top movies that make you go meatless and one of the most pro-vegan or vegetarian films of all time. Some speculate that the way the victims in the movie were butchered in similar ways to animals was a big focus to get this point across. The animal slaughter stories are then interrupted by a hitchhiker along the road.
Hitchhiker? Should we pick him up?
The group's pretty split on whether to pick the hitchhiker up or not. How could a great slasher start off any better than picking up a creepy looking hitchhiker next to a slaughterhouse? Solid idea, guys. The hitchhiker, played by Edwin Neal, gets in the car and makes small talk with the others. He says he doesn't work at the slaughterhouse, but he was there just hanging out, I guess? But says his brother and grandfather both worked at the slaughterhouse. Just when the group didn't think this guy was any cooler, he shows them his neat little Polaroid collection that any sane person would carry around in their little man purse. Are they photos of his friends? No. Are they maybe photos of his cute little Pomeranian back home? No. Just a bunch of bloody pictures from the slaughterhouse where he spends his free time. The hitchhiker then steals Franklin's pocket knife and does his best Schmiegel impression, followed by slicing his hand open for shits and giggles, then handing the bloody knife back to Franklin. Poor Franklin, man. Now the group's had just about enough, and after the hitchhiker kindly offers to host them for a head cheese dinner cooked by his brother from the slaughterhouse, they tell him he needs to kick rocks, and his level of craziness goes from 0 to 100 real quick. And he lights a photo on fire in the car and then stuffs it in his pocket. Amidst the chaos, as everyone's figuring out what the hell's going on, he pulls out his knife again and cuts Franklin's arm. So they throw him, kicking and screaming out of the car, wiping blood all over the side of the car as they drive away. Poor Franklin's now clearly upset, either because he just got slashed by a psychopath or he has to listen to Pam, the astrology queen, babble on about Franklin's horoscope.
Hey, listen to Franklin's horoscope. Long-range plans and upsetting persons around you could make this disturbing and unpredictable day.
Nobody cares, Pam. Well, except for maybe Jerry the driver, who's only encouraging it because he wants to get laid by anybody. I like how at this point, nobody in the car is saying a single word about how fucking weird that hitchhiker was. Maybe it's just poor writing, or maybe the 70s were just that weird. Needing gas, as all youngsters on a road trip looking to get killed do, the group pull into a middle of nowhere type gas station where you'd rather poop your pants than use the bathroom type place. This is when we get to meet Drayton Sawyer, who's only called the old man in this one, played by Jim Cito, who reprises his creepy old man cook role in the sequel 12 years later. The old man gives them the classic "I'm out of gas so you can't get too far" trick. Works every time. After being offered some totally not human barbecue by the old man, Jerry the driver buys some, and as they're taking off, Sally notices the blood on the van and notes that it looks like he was trying to write something. Franklin convinces the group to go to his grandpa's place first instead of getting gas. Next, they pull up to what looks like an abandoned house, and this when the creepy music cues, making the viewer immediately start to feel like this is a bad idea. The crew gets out of the car to explore the house. Franklin immediately raises a valid concern, but gets immediately blown off by Kirk, played by William Vale.
Hey, you don't think that guy'd try and follow us, do you? What for?
The group heads inside, and per usual, nobody helps Franklin get in there, and he's a little feisty now. Man, I'm just hoping everyone dies except for Franklin at this point.
Come on, Franklin. It's gonna be a fun trip.
I'm with you, Franklin. A bunch of bullshit if you ask me. After reminiscing in the house a bit and Jerry trying to get laid again, the two horny teens, Kirk and Pam, head off to go find the swimming hole Franklin was selling them on before they got there. Franklin notices some really odd artwork made from animal bones and tries to get Sally's attention, but of course, is once again ignored. Pam and Kirk find the swimming pool, minus the water part. Off in the distance, you can hear the sound of a generator, so Kirk gets the brilliant idea to go ask whoever's running the generator to hook him up with some gas, yo! After taking another jab at Franklin, Kirk and Pam head over to the neighbor's house. Pam tries to head back, but nope, dumbass Kirk has other ideas, and they head for the neighbor's house to ask for gas, sugar, flour, and immediate death. After knocking on the door, Kirk turns around and a human tooth falls from the sky, a window, or something weird. He goes back and again starts pounding on the door like a determined Mormon missionary. This time though, he opens the screen door to do it. The door opens up and Kirk notices how damn creepy the inside of this house looks. Pam once again tells him they should leave, but dumbass Kirk apparently has a better idea. Kirk hears a pig squealing inside the house and quickly heads for the red little room with the animal skulls in it. And in one of the most memorable moments of the movie and the entire franchise, wham, our first kill of the franchise and the first time in the entire franchise you get a glimpse at Leatherface, who towers over Kirk wearing his infamous skin mask, tie, and bloody apron. Kirk gets brutally bludgeoned in the head by a sledgehammer, and gruesomely his body starts seizing. Leatherface takes another look at Kirk and then bashes his skull in one more time to finish the job. Leatherface tosses his body to the side like a sack of potatoes, then closes some kind of steel industrial looking door. Okay, now you're immediately like, holy shit. And the scary music starts to play. Pam heads for the house wondering what Kirk is up to, and we see one of the most iconic booty shots in horror film history, and arguably the most iconic shot of the film. Fun fact, this particular shot was almost scraped from the movie entirely. Kirk obviously doesn't answer Pam's calls, so like any good horror victim would do, she heads inside the creepy ass house in the middle of nowhere and starts looking around. She admires the exquisite interior decorating in the first room and can't get enough, so she heads to another room and, what the hell? Falls on the floor of feathers? You just walked into the chicken's room without asking, and he's pissed. Pam looks around and sees a ton of weird skeleton decorations all over the room, human bones, a turtle, and some other stuff. This starts a 1.5-minute sequence of close-ups panning all over the room looking at all the weird skeleton stuff. Pam doesn't really feel the feng shui of this room, so she runs out and bam, runs into her new pal Leatherface, giving off his infamous panicky shrieky noise, and another famous moment where the big-ass faceless killer snatches her up off the porch kicking and screaming, drags her back into the room where Kirk most likely went, and then gruesomely tosses her onto a meat hook. I don't know about you guys, but anytime they use a meat hook in a chainsaw movie, I cringe every single time. It's brutal. Pam's clearly in excruciating pain, and luckily for her, she gets a front row seat at Leatherface using his iconic chainsaw for the first time to cut some wood. Just kidding. I meant to make her man Kirk into some nice little fillets for later. Does anyone else think it's a little bit weird that there's not only no blood spraying everywhere, but the chainsaw is also completely clean? Anyways, the others are still back at Granddaddy's house chatting with Franklin some more about the crazy hitchhiker. After Jerry makes fun of Franklin a little bit more, he decides to make a little sunset walk back to the creek to look for the others. Jerry makes the same mistake as the others and follows the generator sound to the same house. He knocks a few times and then notices Pam's sweater laying on the porch.
Hey guys, quit playing games. Quit goofing on me.
He hears some very inviting giggling noises coming from inside and thinks Kirk and Pam are goofing on him, so he heads inside immediately, walking to the same spot Kirk was killed, and I immediately thought he was getting killed in the same way. Instead, he hears a knocking sound in another room and heads over to find Pam trying to cool off from all this Texas heat in a nice little meat fridge locker thingy. Pam gives us one of the best jump scares of the movie, and Jerry the driver startles Leatherface and meets the same fate as his old pal Kirk at the end of the good old Leatherface hammer. Leatherface frantically runs around a bit more to see if there's anyone else, and when he sees the coast is clear, he sits down and gives us a scene that I'm sure viewers in 1974 were haunted with for a long time. A close-up of his beautiful face and his lip and teeth licking like you see in so many of the other Chainsaw films. Not only is this scene creepy as hell and gives us our first real close-up look at Leatherface, but damn, look at those eyelashes. While those three are enjoying some southern hospitality with the big fella, Franklin and his sister Sally are sitting in the dark wondering what the hell's going on. They decide to honk their horn a bunch to get the others' attention in case they're lost, and once again Franklin seems genuinely concerned for the group. Aw, Franklin, even though he's definitely annoying at times, what a nice guy. Sally, once again, has crappy ideas on what to do next, and Franklin's ideas, although not the greatest in hindsight, are much better than Sally's. Franklin suggests that they head back to the gas station to get help, whereas Sally really wants to go out in the dark and look for the others. They eventually decide to head off and find the others. Just like the rest of the group, they see the house, so they go right for it like naive young victims in a horror movie that really want to get murdered. During this calming night walk through the beautiful weeds of North Texas, Franklin decides to blind the audience before giving us his last few valuable pieces of insight, which of course are ignored by Sally. Then we get, in my opinion, the best jump scare of the movie when the Big L pops out of nowhere, ripping the chainsaw on his first pull and absolutely goes to town on poor old Franklin.
Sally, I hear something. Stop. Stop.
One thing you'll notice in several of the Chainsaw films is that Leatherface had to have been a ballerina at one point in time, because this twinkle toes can always sneak up on his victims super well, even in a field full of leaves, weeds, and all other kinds of loud shit. It's impressive. And holy hell, man, does the big fella go absolutely ham on the other big fella, sawing through Franklin at least 5 times that we can see on camera. This time we get some great blood splatters and this amazing shot of Franklin being nice enough to light up his own death with his flashlight, giving us just enough light to see the kill and also keep it ultra creepy at the same time. Sally gets the hell out of Dodge and runs off into the woods in an absolute panic. Absolutely no sneaking up on her now, as Leatherface chases Sally all through the thick weeds with the chainsaw in full effect the entire time. Sally sees the human meat factory we call a farmhouse and runs right for it. I love this moment when Leatherface runs toward the camera with the chainsaw in his hand. He's hauling ass, and Gunnar Hansen does such a good job portraying this character. Sally runs through the front door and locks it. Sally bolts upstairs and rudely interrupts the decomposing grandpa and grandma trying to enjoy some quiet time together. She tries to leave downstairs before Leatherface gets in, but it's too late, so they go back upstairs, and Sally, like a badass with no hesitation, hops out of the 2-story window. But damn, she's really lucky she didn't hit that cement staircase on the way down. As Leatherface makes his way downstairs, Sally runs off toward the darkness of the night, but the big fella is right on her tail. A minute-long, no-dialogue chase sequence ensues, then as any good girl in a horror movie would do, she hits a tree and falls down. Leatherface somehow misses a perfect opportunity to chop her up to make some 50-50 Sally Franklin burgers. Sally's face then turns from I'm dead to I'm probably dead, but there's a gas station up ahead at least. I guess the barbecued human fingers were that good. She busts through the door and oddly the chainsaw noises are immediately gone and Leatherface is nowhere to be seen. The old man, or as he's also known in the movie as the cook, shuts the door and attempts to comfort Sally. She tells him what happened and the old man takes a peek outside and reassures her that there's nobody there. The old man leaves and for some reason we now cut to a long, slow close-up of Sally's face and the totally not human barbecue right next to her. The old man is back with his truck and a burlap sack. Come on, Sally. Maybe he just wants to have a burlap sack race with you to get your mind off of things. Oh wait, that's a rope too. This isn't going well. And for the first time in the movie, we see a character attempt to fight back as Final Girl Sally grabs the big knife next to her, but Slick Rick Sawyer pulls a fast one and beats the knife away and starts smacking Sally with a broom. He eventually hits her kinda softly and somehow that knocks Sally almost unconscious. As she's woozy, the old man ties her up and takes her for a little joyride back to the house. Dang, even during a kidnapping, the old man is still worried about keeping his business running. It's impressive.
Had to lock up and get the lights. Cost of electricity is enough to drive a man out of business.
On the drive over, we get some great shots of the old man's great teeth, along with some soft and relaxing pokes for Sally. He's enjoying this way too much. Just before the house, they run into the hitchhiker from the beginning of the movie, and the old man immediately gets out and starts hitting him too with the stick, asking where he's been. We get a ton of information about the Sawyer family in the next several scenes as we find out the hitchhiker is actually Leatherface's brother, and we also get to see how weird the relationships are between everyone in the family. The cook gets pissed about the front door that Leatherface broke, as any old man would, and as soon as he sees Leatherface, he starts beating him with the stick too. And like a little kid, Leatherface cries and curls up as he's hitting him. A huge difference from some of the previous scenes where Leatherface aggressively chases Sally through the woods with his chainsaw.
He's the most powerful character in the film, physically. He is the most violent of the characters in the film. He's also the most frightened character in the film.
He has somehow, by the older brother, probably assumed that role, that the feminine role in the house.
Even though he's extremely violent and dangerous, in fact, he's really defending himself. That's really what he does.
He's a big baby. I mean, in fact, inside the movie, he freaks out because he doesn't know where in the hell are they coming from? Where are all these people coming from?
The hitchhiker brings Sally into the house and ties her to a chair. Looking like a kid opening his N64 on Christmas Day, he removes the sack from her head and is pleasantly surprised it's one of the girls who kicked him out of the car.
I thought you was in a hurry.
Leatherface shows the old man the other victims, and the hitchhiker heads upstairs to grab Grandpa so old Pappy can see what treasures they were able to find. They set up Grandpa and then slice open Sally's finger. They then let old Pappy suck the blood out of it. I thought he was dead for sure. Grandpa looks like he's enjoying this way too much, and Sally passes out as any sane person would do. Who the fuck knows how much time has passed here, but we're now close up on Sally's face as she wakes up. And now the famous dinner scene begins. Sally immediately screams because this is exactly how she imagined spending her evening on vacation. Leatherface has now switched to his suit and tie and Pretty Woman mask. Gunnar Hansen said that whatever mask Leatherface wore really determined his personality.
You've heard the expression, you are what you eat. Yeah, well, Leatherface is what he wears, you know. He assumes the personality and the character of the mask he dons.
Sally begs for her life, but this only fuels the fire. The hitchhiker calls the old man nothing but a worthless cook, which pisses him off. The old man claims he doesn't find any pleasure in killing. Sure, bud. The constant close-ups on Sally's face, along with the music, make you feel incredibly unsettled and tense during this entire scene. The close-ups on Sally's eyes, along with the screams and the music, really get me during this entire scene. This scene only feels that much more real when you consider how incredibly miserable the actors were during filming this. Surrounded by rotting food, 100-degree weather, and 27 hours of shooting this scene, they shot this scene also during the day with blackout curtains, and many say that the people on set were literally throwing up because of the heat. Now the hitchhiker insists Grandpa gets in on the fun and gives Sally a good whacking. Kicking and screaming, they hold Sally over a bucket in front of Grandpa Sawyer, who struggles to get in a good shot, but does eventually hit Sally several times. As soon as the hitchhiker lets go of Sally to get his own licks in, Sally breaks free and once again jumps out a window, and this time to the light of day. We cut to another close-up of Sally, which shows an expression of not only sheer terror, but also relief that she might have a chance. Hobbled on a busted leg, she starts running the hell out of there. Sally actually did hurt her ankle filming the scene, which is why she's limping. Two things I've always wondered here. Why did it take them so long to get out of the house and run after her? And why in the hell is the hitchhiker running in a zigzag behind her? The hitchhiker eventually catches up to Sally as soon as she reaches the end of the driveway, all while slashing her with his knife. At this point, holy shit, Sally's a giant bloody mess. He continues slashing her in such a rage, he doesn't even notice the semi-truck heading right at them. Sally jumps out of the way and we get one of my favorite kills of the movie, and always one of my favorite kills in any movie. A good old ran over by a semi-truck kill, using the famous old reverse footage trick. The hitchhiker is immediately crushed under the tires of the truck as Sally stands there and watches, with what has to be a feeling of shock and absolute joy all mixed into one. The cattle truck driver, played by Ed Gwynn, immediately stops the truck to see what the hell is going on, and oh snap, there's a giant dude with a chainsaw, let's get out of here. Chase back into the truck, Sally and the truck driver for some reason don't drive off, but jump out of the truck on the other side? But first grabbing his wrench on the floor of the truck, Leatherface chases them around the other side of the truck, and the truck driver makes a hell of a throw, implanting his wrench into Leatherface's forehead, causing him to fall backwards and his chainsaw to fall right onto his leg, cutting a massive gash in his right leg, which was filmed with a metal plate covering Gunnar Hansen's leg. Leatherface gets up and limps towards the two as a pickup truck drives by, swings around and picks up Sally. Why does he have to restart his engine? But they speed off just in time for Leatherface to miss a few more swings at Sally by a few inches. Sally, now in the back of the truck, starts frantically laughing like how I feel when McDonald's brings back the snack wraps, as she finally escapes her nightmare. So what happened to the truck driver? Well, rumor has it the truck driver was seen many years later at a Texas roadhouse on his third basket of fresh-baked rolls. Leatherface ends the movie with his iconic sunrise chainsaw dance that, fun fact, was actually improvised by Gunnar Hansen.
So the dance all came about because I thought it'd be kind of fun, since this was it, the movie is over. It would be kind of fun to try to scare Toby with the saw. Now, there were no teeth on the chain, but yes, it was a functioning saw. There's nothing nicer than seeing your director with the fear in his eyes.
And then the movie immediately cuts to the credits, leaving most of the killers in the movie still at large. By this point in the filming process, the crew was ready to kill each other. Filming the scenes in the car and in the house were cramped and incredibly hot during a brutal Texas summer heat wave. And after the 27-hour straight filming session for the dinner scene with the smell of rotten food and body odor, the crew was just done. On top of this, after the film's massive success, the actors ended up making very little money, and many of them were pretty upset about that. Several of the actors felt betrayed that the financial agreements for the film were not what they were told they were.
If you look at all of us who worked on the film, we probably got paid less for the time we spent than if we'd gotten a job at McDonald's. 9 months after the film was released, when we were expecting to see a lot of money because the movie was doing so well, my first royalty check was for $47.07.
It was a very unpleasant experience for most of the people involved. It was a film made for $125,000 that should have been about half of that. And it was a film that made, we don't know how much, but at least $100 million, and we saw pittance out of it because for one reason or another, we got ripped off.
Apparently, as director Tobe Hooper was shopping the film around, it was eventually purchased by a company named Bryanston Distribution, which come to find out was a front for the mafia.
Basically, they made a deal with a known mafia company and they couldn't figure out why they got ripped off and said, think about it.
After getting very little money from the success of the film, eventually in 1976, a lawsuit was filed against Bryanston, but the company was now broke. Instead, they settled out of court for a $400,000 payment and for Bryanston to relinquish control of the film. When you go to make a deal with a company whose first movie was a porno, they got links to the Colombo crime family, the guy's got a scar across his eye, there's a handgun on the desk, you should probably know that it's a bad idea. To this day, no one knows how much money was stolen from those involved in making the film. But despite all this, the crew says they actually really enjoyed people they got to work with, and many have said there wasn't a single bad apple on set. Speaking of bad apples, let's find out if the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one we want to grab or is one we want to stab. First of all are the kills. There were 5 total deaths in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and none of them all that bad. I would have to say that my personal favorite though goes to Kirk, which was definitely a shocking and gruesome moment up until the film at that time. Getting hit with the sledgehammer, being dragged off, with the metal door slam, with the seizure, it just seemed super realistic and shocking. Followed closely second by Franklin's death, which was definitely the most bloody death, and it was also my favorite jump scare of the movie. You can see that some of these kills definitely inspired kills that we see in later horror movies and just inspired the genre, and were definitely trend setting for the genre at the time. They definitely weren't the most gruesome kills that you'll see in a horror movie, but like I said, definitely trend setting and set up a lot of kills that you'll see in later movies. Second are the characters, who, as I mentioned before, were not very good. I felt like they were just bags of meat waiting to be killed. They didn't really put much of an effort into writing more of a backstory for the characters. We knew a little bit about Sally and Franklin, of course, but overall the characters, you just didn't root for them or really care about them. Plus, most of them were pretty annoying. Third, the impact the movie had on the genre was huge. Not only is this one of the most iconic horror films of all time, but it also inspired using a giant faceless killer as the main antagonist, like we see in movies like Friday the 13th, using power tools as murder weapons, and so many other things that we've seen in the horror genre up until this point. It also spiraled into 8 other movies, comic books, video games, and so many other things. So I think the answer to this one is the impact was massive. And lastly, how scary is the movie? I think this one's pretty obvious. I mean, there was a reason why the movie was banned in so many countries, and even to today, the movie holds up as being just super gruesome and horrifying and just unsettling. There's a reason why throughout the entire movie, you just don't feel comfortable with the music and what you're seeing on screen. It's just a scary movie. I think on top of that, people find it really scary because it's not about supernatural things. I think that really hits home to people that they think that this could happen to them in real life. I don't know about you, but when it's somewhat believable, I can find that to be more scary for me too. So overall, definitely a scary movie that holds up to today. And with that said, I'm gonna have to go with a grab on this one. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't a movie that I usually gravitate towards, but it's just too iconic and just too good to pass up. I know this isn't a movie for everybody, but if you're a horror fan and you haven't at least seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre once, you should definitely go and see it. Also, keep something in mind, guys. Regardless if I like a movie or not, you should definitely go and watch it for yourself. First of all, you're supporting the horror genre, which just means we'll potentially get more horror movies. But second of all, a movie that maybe I don't like, you might actually love that movie. So you should definitely go and watch it and make your own decisions for yourself. And there you go. That wraps up the iconic original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. Next week, we jump 12 years into the future and take a look at the massively different Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, starring Dennis Hopper, also directed by Tobe Hooper. In the meantime though, I'm Matt McFarland, and you just finished watching Grab or Stab. Thank you so much for watching the first ever episode of Grab or Stab on my new channel, Mad Blood. I'm so excited to kick off this channel with such an iconic movie. Even though the Chainsaw movies are not movies that I typically gravitate towards, the original is just too good and too iconic to pass up. If you enjoy horror content like this, or just horror content in general, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also hit the like button. That really helps get this channel off to a good start. New Grab or Stab episodes will be coming out every single Friday. All of my additional social media links will be down below in the description. But anyways, thank you again for watching. I really, really do appreciate it, and take care, everybody.